Good morning, and it's Tuesday, and welcome to the Vicarage here at Penn. Hope you're cheerful and well, and looking forward to a good day with God today. Now, they have various patron saints, don't they? St. Christopher, I believe, is the patron saint of travellers. St. Cecilia is the patron saint of musicians. St. George is the patron saint of England. Well, I think St. Paul should be the patron saint of pussycats. Why do I say that? Well, they say cats have 9 lives. Up to this point, Paul has already survived death threats against him in the Aegean Sea and Damascus. He's also faced escape from baying crowds baying for his blood in, I've written a few of these down, Iconium, Lystra, Berea, Philippi, Thessalonica, Ephesus, and they're just the ones we know about. And context for this morning's reading, Paul comes to Jerusalem, the city of peace, and he's been accused of undermining the Jewish nation. He's given the opportunity to speak, he speaks, and up to this point, they listen politely, and then the following happens. Acts 22, starting to read at verse 22. Here goes. Fasten your seatbelts, see if you can follow this one. Up to this point, they listened to him, but then they shouted, "Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live." And while they were shouting, throwing off their cloaks and tossing dust into the air, the tribune directed that he was to be brought into the barracks and ordered him to be examined by flogging, to find out the reason for this outcry against him. But when they'd tied him with thongs, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, "Is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who's uncondemned?" When the centurion heard that, he went to the tribune and said to him, "What are you about to do? This man's a Roman citizen." The tribune then came and asked Paul, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" And he said, "Yes." The tribune answered, "It costs me a large sum of money to get my citizenship." Paul said, "But I was born a citizen." Immediately those who were about to examine him drew back from him, and the tribune was also afraid, for he realized that Paul was a Roman citizen and that he had bound him. Since he wanted to find out what Paul was being accused of by the Jews, the next day he released him and ordered the chief priests and the entire council to meet. They brought Paul down and had him stand before them. While Paul was looking intently at the council, he said, "Brothers, up to this day I've lived my life with a clear conscience before God." Then the high priest, Ananias, ordered those standing near him to strike him on the mouth. At this, Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting there to judge me according to the law? Yet in violation of the law, or you ordered me to be struck?" Those standing nearby said, "Do you dare to insult God's high priest?" And Paul said, "I didn't realize, brothers, that he was high priest, for it's written, 'You shall not speak evil of a leader of your people.'" When Paul noticed that some were Sadducees and others were Pharisees, he called out in the council, "Brothers, I'm a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. I'm on trial concerning the hope of the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dissension began between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say that there's no resurrection, or angel, or spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge all three. Then a clamour arose, and certain of the Pharisees' group stood up and contended, "We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or angel has spoken to him?" When the dissension became violent, the tribune, fearing they'd tear Paul to pieces, ordered the soldiers to go down, take him by force, and bring him into the barracks. That night the Lord stood near him and said, "Keep up your courage, but just as you testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must bear witness also in Rome." And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, as I said, Paul had, it's going to be more than 9 lives, I think. And I think that Steven Spielberg really should get the film rights on this one. So he's arriving in Jerusalem, Paul, and he's accused of subverting the nation. And a huge, violent riot breaks out. And they're about to tear him to pieces. So the Roman tribune sees that there's a riot going on, doesn't know what the riot's about, but wants it stopped. So he sends the snatch squad in, pulls Paul out. Hearing that Paul speaks very nicely, and that he's not the person that sent 4,000 terrorists into Egypt a few months before, he allows Paul to speak. And he speaks. And the crowd, hearing that he speaks Hebrew and he's a Jewish person, they give him the chance to speak. And he speaks, and he gives his testimony about how he became a Christian. And everything is going well, and they're listening politely, until he mentions the fact that he wants to bring the faith in Jesus to the Gentiles. At this point, they get angry again, and they're baying for his blood and demanding his death. At this point again, not knowing why he is hated so much, But knowing you can't just pull someone to pieces like that, for the second time, the Tribune sends the SNAT squad in to rescue Paul. They take him out. They take him back to the barracks. And if you thought that was the end of the story, I'm afraid not. At this point, the Tribune, he's rescued Paul, but he needs to know what the riot was about. So basically, he decides to find out from Paul using torture. And just when he's about to start torturing Paul, Paul says, hang on a minute, is it legal to torture a Roman citizen who hasn't actually been condemned of anything, hasn't been found guilty of anything? At this point, the Romans, one looks at the other, oh my goodness, he's a Roman citizen. And the punishment for torturing a Roman citizen without due cause is severe. So let him go. But the Tribune is still not happy. Sure, he's rescued Paul now, I think for the third time, but he still wants to know what the riot was all about. So he calls the council together. And Paul's then given the opportunity to speak to the council. But Paul here is very clever, because he knows that half the people are Pharisees and half the people are Sadducees. The difference being the Pharisees believe in the resurrection and the Sadducees don't. You always remember that, because they don't believe in the resurrection, so they are sad, you see. Anyway, there we go. And Paul realised this, so he then starts off by saying, I'm a Pharisee. At which point the Pharisees say, oh, this chap's not so bad chap after all. And the Sadducees say, yes, he is. And just when they're about to tear him to pieces again, for the fourth time in the day, the Tribune rescues Paul, and then Paul goes home. And then there's that lovely bit at the end when Jesus appears to him. So it was quite a day for Paul, wasn't it? I think for the fourth time in the day, the Tribune rescues him from his life. And it was quite a day. And as I say, we could get the film rights for it, you'd probably make quite a lot of money. I think there's just two things, though, about this, which I want us to know. Firstly, it becomes clear from this discussion in the council at the end about the resurrection, that Christians, we believe in the resurrection, and that Pharisees did and Sadducees didn't. And to this day, some people do and some people don't. And those that don't, you might call them atheists and that sort of thing. The trouble is, though, and it's reading things like, non-religious funerals and this type of stuff. And I guess if that's what people want, that's what they can have. And people can believe, of course, whatever they like. The thing that saddens me, though, about not believing in the resurrection, not believing in life after death, not believing in God, is that actually, in the end, there's no hope. Life doesn't mean anything. Death really does have the last word. When you're dead, that's it. No more. Finito, bonito. That's the sad thing about atheism and not believing in the resurrection and not believing in life after death, because ultimately, this life is ultimately fairly meaningless. Death does have the last word. Believing in God and believing in Jesus and believing in the resurrection and life after death means that actually this life means something, that actually it has repercussions for life beyond, that there is hope. There is something beyond this. And when life, especially when life gets tough, there is hope that there is something beyond this, that there is a heaven and there is hope and something to look forward to. So I want to say very clearly, and Paul did, that we believe in the resurrection as shown in Jesus Christ. We do believe in life after death, and thanks to him, it's going to be good. The other thing, though, at the end of all this riot, when Paul's been rescued for the fourth time, and you goes back to his room, and then Jesus appears to him. And it's interesting because I hadn't spotted this before, but Paul sees and meets the risen Jesus at the beginning at the Damascus Road. But it's not the only time. Here, Jesus comes alongside him and reassures him. And coming to know Jesus Christ is not just a one-off thing. You're not just saved and then that's it. You don't just meet Jesus and then that's it. Although that does change your life, of course. Knowing Jesus is an ongoing thing. And at certain times in our lives, Jesus speaks to us and God speaks to us and guides us. I believe very strongly, for example, that I was guided to come to be Vicar of Penn. You may or may not be pleased about that. But at times in our lives, God appears to us and God guides us. And it happens to all of us in different ways. And it's wonderful that at the end of all this heck of a day for Paul, Jesus appears to him. And so on this day, my friends, may you be full of the joy of the resurrection and the hope that is in God, that this is not the end, there's more than this. But also may you know God with you in a very special way, a reassuring and encouraging